Okay. So I know they haven't told us what empaths mean yet, but in the first sentence, they talk about how emotions are contagious. That is, they travel from person to person,
Yeah.
they get transmitted. And then empaths are especially something to others' emotions. So the context suggests that this next sentence is about someone who is, I guess, extra open to that contagion. So from the context, sensitive makes more sense than resistant.
Explain this one.
So attuned to others, this is using a different metaphor. So in the first sentence they talk about contagion. That is, it's like emotion is something that spreads like a disease. Here they're talking about being attuned to is like being able to pick up a signal. So, you tune a radio or you tune a television, analog television. So if you're attuned to others, it means that you're able to pick up more subtle signals from others. Um, I guess firstly, insight is usually positively valued, whereas this is something negative that's happening. It's in a list of negative things. So if you gain insight in something, also you don't usually get drawn into insight, that is pulled in. You usually gain it or attain it or find it or seek it. Um, so, whereas a relationship, because it's a set of interactions in a pattern between two or more people, that could be something you're drawn into, you're pulled in. Um, so, insight doesn't quite work. In the full context, it doesn't quite work, but also, I don't know what a codependent insight would be. I think you could have insights into codependency. That is, if you understood that phenomenon. Um, so codependent is it's like a psychological word that has become an everyday word. Um, and it means mutually dependent. That is, they depend on each other. But in psychology, it's usually about how people's psychological imbalances work together. They become like a gruesome twosome. It's two people who get connected in an unhealthy way, because one of them maybe one of them is too submissive and one of them is too dominating, and so they feed each other's worst tendencies. Um, Yeah, so that's what codependent relationship means because it's about psychology, it's about relationships between people. It's a risk. If you're very sensitive to others' needs, you might be easily drawn into one of these situations where someone who is insensitive to other people's needs kind of uses you, and
Mhm.
you're kind of using them, or maybe you're just ending up dependent on them in a strange way.
So you mean,
Yeah, and I guess they don't mean it's necessarily um totally abusive. It could be just that they have their own psychological problems
mm,
and you're feeding them. Those problems are being fed or sustained by your tendency to be involved closely with what other people are feeling.
mhm.
Yeah, you might over-identify with them. You might think, okay, this person's really angry all the time. What can I do to help them? And then be looking for those signs and trying to respond to them. Whereas what you should be saying is, you're really angry all the time. Go get some help. Go talk to a psychologist,
Yeah,
or have a holiday or something.
yeah.
Yeah. So to burn out is to it's kind of to go beyond using your resources. So the idea is you're tired, but you're beyond tired because you've used up things that you need to sustain yourself. Um, so it's usually used again in a psychological situation where someone can't function anymore because instead of looking after themselves enough to keep functioning, getting enough sleep, focusing on the things they need to focus on to keep their life running, they've spent time on something else. People sometimes burn out from caregiving, but they also sometimes burn out from working too much. Like if you become obsessed with your job, or you have to work really, really hard in your job all the time, and you can never have quieter periods and busier periods, then that could lead to burnout as well. Um, it's a psychological idea again. It's studied under that heading burnout, and it's about the combination of emotion, um, I guess mental processes, and also physical tiredness.
So,
So greater is a it's because of greater. So greater is a strange adjective. Um, it it means um, it's the comparative form of great, and great is about size. So it's about size, or perhaps about intensity. So to say that something is great, the way we do in everyday life, is actually to kind of use it a little bit imprecisely, to say, oh yeah, I had a great time. Literally, that means I had a large time or an intense time. Um, so you can have greater insight, that is more insight. Um, you can't really have greater relationships, because that would imply that the relationships are somehow larger. Um, you could have greater relationships if you're using it in a very informal way. Greater relationships.
mhm,
But greater than always means of a greater quantity than, or a greater
mhm.
size than, which would be unusual for a relationship if we're talking about interpersonal relationships. Yeah.
Maybe
In this register, that would be seen as it would be you'd be talking about having unconventional relationships.
unconventional relationship.
Or you might
Yeah.
you might be talking about having a greater number of friendships.
Mhm. Friendship.
Um, in which case we'd have to specify that it's the number, not the thing itself, because of how greater is used a bit loosely. So it literally means to do with quantity, but if we're talking about something being great, we use it in a colloquial kind of non-literal way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. And